Yes.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
I'm gonna call the meeting to order. We have forum. First thing I wanted to do is, I've asked Rich to help us with the, welcome protocol and his manao. So Rich is going to share some of his manao with us before we commence.
Okay, aloha, good morning. Thanks, Chair, for asking me to do this. Just wanted to share, I didn't think about what to say till this morning when I woke up with this feeling of determination, and I tried to kind of imagine an image that would be good to share with you and see if it resonates with the board members. So for all my life, since I was a kid, I've been a surfer. I spent many hours out in the ocean and continue to do that today, even though each decade the board gets a little bit thicker as I put on a little bit more weight, but I still try to go out whenever I can. And when I go surf, especially if the waves are bigger and more consequential, I kind of sit on the beach and I watch for a while. I look at the tide and the reef and the currents, the wind, time the sets. And of course, nowadays, if it's too big, I don't go out. As they say, if in doubt, don't go out. But if I can handle, then I paddle out and I see where the right takeoff spot is, and I work my way over to that spot, kind of observing the whole time, watching for the big sets. And when it's big, I always start off a little cautious at first. But when the right wave comes, then it switches, something switches inside of me from this careful observation and caution to just charging them. Because as I learned from many years of surfing, the worst thing you can do is not paddle hard enough, or worse yet, you pull back right at the last moment, because if you do that, you'll get sucked over the falls, and that's like the worst kind wipeout. So that image, as I was thinking about it, the legislature formed this authority to develop and implement a new management plan, one that's rooted in Hawaiian values, community representation, and it's an opportunity for all of us to, along with the community, manage Mauna Kea in a whole new way going forward. And I feel like the first 2 years of the transition have been the prep and the observation and the entering the water and the paddling out. And my feeling of determination, I feel like now is a time to paddle with determination and catch the wave. No pulling back, gotta dig in and go. And as a board, we're all in it together. And yes, there's all kinds of complications and risks, but I'm confident we'll make it. And that is the kind of determination I woke up with this morning. And I hope I'm not off base, but I wanted to share that to bring us together as we work on our shared purpose to steward the Mauna together along with the community. So mahalo, that's my manao for today.
Thank you, Rich. Mahalo.
That was beautiful, Rich, mahalo.
With that, I wanted to introduce to all of you Hokule Lindsay. Hokule is standing in, she's Attorney General, and she's standing in this morning for Craig Iha. So welcome. Thank you. Thank you for standing in and providing us with guidance. With that, we don't have any public comments on any of our agenda items, so I move to the approval of the minutes of February 13, 2025. Any amendments or changes to the minutes?
No, but I move that we approve the minutes as written.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? If not, before I call for the vote, can those of you on Zoom confirm that there's no one else in the room with you? Thank you. Okay, so with that, there's a motion to approve the minutes of February 13, 2025. All in favor, raise your right hand or say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Chair's report. Legislative update. As you know, we put in a measure that dealt with sunshine. We also put in a measure that dealt with the issue of who has authority to make conservation decisions on the at the scientific reserve and Halepoaku, as well as what happens with the CDUPs on January 1st, 2028. If you all recollect, the Act 255 specifically, the legislature, when they passed Act 255, specifically requested that we put in amendments or changes or modifications. They realized when they passed Act 255 that it was not a full and complete. They had not thought of all of the issues, so they actually invited us to file proposals in terms of changes, etc. Unfortunately, and very disappointingly, the current legislature decided not to hear any of our bills. The Sunshine Bill was heard, but the other two bills were neither heard in the State House nor the State Senate. It doesn't quite make sense to me in the sense of the fact that they actually told us to file those bills, the prior legislature. So anyway, we're in the process of trying to do more research analysis, talk to people at the Capitol about what's happening, because without clarification of some of those issues on July 1st, 2028, it's going to be very unclear and going to be a big mess. So anyway, we're working on that, but like I said, it's very, very disappointing that we didn't even get a hearing. In the State Senate, we were supposed to have a session with the Water Land Committee to give them a briefing about our status, and that meeting was canceled and never rescheduled. So we are not appearing whatsoever in the Senate and appearing before the Water Land Committee. Again, highly unusual for us not to be asked to at least give the members of the committee a briefing. So again, we're putting that together. We're trying to figure out exactly what our next steps are, where we should be going. The next item is that John DeFries, Ben Kudo, and I had the opportunity to sit down with the new University of Hawaii president, President Hensel. We had a very, very productive and candid and direct meeting. She pledged, we tried to focus on the future as opposed to some of the things that have happened in the past. And she pledged her personal commitment that she will do everything within her power to make sure that this transition occurs in an appropriate way. And asked us to reach out to her if we ever got the sense that things were not proceeding as they should be. We talked because of her kind of newness, she had actually gone up to Mauna Kea, I think the week before, but she still was trying to get a handle on some of the issues. We agreed to disagree on some of the legislation, but she pledged again, let's try to find a solution that sort of satisfies everyone. So that's one of the things that we're trying to work on. But a very, very cordial, productive meeting. I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
No, other than I was really encouraged by her attitude about the whole thing, and you know, I'm certain that her entire day is made up of Mauna Kea type stuff at the university. So you can take the topic title out and insert something else, athletics or anything. But the amount of time she gave us, the focus that she brought into the meeting, and just her general disposition was very uplifting and encouraging. So I'm grateful for that. And Gabe Lee, the board chair, was also there with us.
Right. So yeah, just as an aside, she was super focused on what was happening at the federal level and how that might impact the university, not as it relates to specifically Mauna Kea, but it was clear that was like top of mind for her at the time that we met. But nonetheless, like John said, she was gracious enough to continue on with our meeting, and we look forward to working with her. Number 3, or C, status of the OHA lawsuit. Basically, although the court, let me back up. OHA filed what is called a motion for summary judgment. And if you remember what the lawsuit that OHA filed basically said that we were unconstitutional because we violated what is called the contracts clause in the state and the United States Constitution. OHA filed what is called a summary judgment motion. What a summary judgment motion is a motion asking the court to rule in OHA's favor. The court eventually denied that motion, but in denying the motion, from a practical sense, she has basically, in my opinion, dismissed all of the claims of OHA. The case is not really dismissed, but what she said is that OHA doesn't have the standing, so it basically has no right to file a lawsuit challenging, on the basis that they did, challenging the validity of the creation of the Mauna Kea Authority. What she said is that OHA does not have a contract with the Mauna Kea Authority, and therefore, or any state entity that doesn't have a contract that was infringed upon by way of the creation of the Mauna Kea Authority. So therefore, if you have no interest in in a contract that is actually adversely affected, you have no standing. So they had no right. They basically have no right to bring the lawsuit. So in effect, what she says is that they cannot bring the lawsuit, at least on that basis. So although she denied their motion for summary judgment, I characterize it as a determination that the lawsuit has no validity, based upon the court's ruling. The other thing that happened in the OHA lawsuit is that the lawsuit was brought by Justice Klein and his law firm. Justice Klein has filed a motion that was actually granted to withdraw as counsel. And I was somewhat curious that the basis of the withdrawal was that nobody would return his call, and he was not having any kind of communications with his client, and therefore did not believe that he could effectively represent their client. So anyway, so I don't know what the politics are or what's happening with OHA. I just read what was in the motion. The court has allowed him to withdraw, him and his law firm to withdraw as counsel for OHA. So as we sit here today, OHA has no representation in this lawsuit. They are trying to seek counsel to represent them. Because of that, the trial in this matter was originally scheduled for July. OHA has asked that the trial be postponed. We will agree to have the trial postponed, primarily because the court is gonna, in my experience, the court would, if they don't have a lawyer, the court is going to allow them to do it anyway, to move the trial. So I've told the Attorney General that we don't have any objection to them resetting the trial so that they can get counsel. So I'm not exactly sure where we're going with this lawsuit, but like I said, my opinion is that they'll be hard pressed to go for, even though we haven't filed a motion for summary judgment, they'll be hard pressed to go forward with the lawsuit. So like I said, I consider the lawsuit as being, from a practical standpoint, as being dismissed. Any questions about either the lawsuit or legislature or meeting with UH president?
Sure, can I add to that? As you all may know, OHA has gone through a leadership change. We have a new board chair, and in relation to this lawsuit, it would be appropriate to just open communication channels at my level with CEO at OHA to see if we can get to an agreement that there are more productive ways for OHA to support our efforts and for us to support OHA. So in the weeks ahead, I'll be reaching out to the CEO there.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Yeah, you mentioned you had some disagreements with the UH president. Can you share where you guys disagree?
Primarily on the CDUPs, on what happens with the existing CDUPs. As you remember, the issue was the CDUPs, the conservation use permits are issued to the University of Hawaii and not to the individual observatories. Her concern is if our bill went through, those conservation use permits would be stay with the University of Hawaii. She's saying that if we have lost some of the powers that we had because of Act 255, how can you give us the CDUPs and we don't have the power to execute on them, basically, execute on some of the conditions. So that was the primary issue, right? And what I was telling her is that, but if we keep them, we are in conflict. We are both the permittee as well as the regulator. So how can we be put in a position where we are both the permittee and the regulator at the same time? That conflict is something that we can't overcome, right? So that was the primary disagreement that we had about that, and we didn't go in depth, but we had a slight conversation about that.
And that was the issue that was supposed to be hopefully addressed at the legislature, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Okay, if not, I'm going to go to the. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm going back to the legislative update and your disappointment that the legislature didn't hold hearings. You know, I think in due respect to them, it's a tough, they get shot with a fire hose that time of year during session, and there's a lot of information that goes through and courses through, so hard for them to kind of stay up on things and to have these hearings. So we did an excellent legislative report, and I think, is there any plan, John DeFries, to have an ongoing communication strategy? And let me add that I also know you made rounds, but is there a plan to have an ongoing communication strategy where we lay out our major goals and milestones and just kind of on a routine basis keep them up to date so that we're not utilizing a legislative hearing as the only means to inform them as to our activities?
The answer is yes. We will formulate and agree to a format that's easy to provide updates and a snapshot on that. But yeah, our work just begins
Good.
at the legislature. Yeah.
And as you all recollect, we are required by Act 255 to submit an annual report. And I know, Neil, we talked about it earlier that it is quite a lengthy report. So we're trying to figure out how to do more an executive summary kind of thing where we could just use the highlights. But we did also meet with the chairs separately of both the Senate and the House Waterland committees earlier in the session to kind of tell them where we are and have that discussion. But nonetheless, we didn't have a hearing on any of our bills. Other questions, comments? Okay, going to the next issue, governance. Under there, we have scheduled a board retreat for March 23rd. But right now we're having some logistical issues in terms of making that happen. So by tomorrow, the staff will be calling you as to whether or not that actually occurs or not. Having some pretty significant logistical issues that may make it very difficult to have the retreat. And having said that, at the same time, if we don't have the retreat, we understand the need for us to continue on with our discussion about vision, goals, aspirations, etc. So we're gonna try to come up with an alternative way to kind of address that issue, but we're still in discussion, so hopefully by tomorrow, all of the members will get a call from the staff to kind of explain where we're at on that. Okay? So keep it on your calendar. The point is, keep it on the calendar for now until you hear from the staff tomorrow. Okay. With that, I'm gonna turn well, let me go back to the legislative update for one thing. Four of us are up for renomination and confirmation this year. Paul Horner, Rich Matsuda, Noi, and myself. So we're going through that process now. We've had discussions with the leadership of both the Senate and the House and the governor's office. So we're trying to put together how exactly that's going to work. He has to be on a list of three potential candidates. Paul Horner, because he was a selection of the Senate president, asked the Senate president if he decides to reappoint Paul or nominate Paul, has to be on the list with two others. Noi was the representative or the individual chosen by the speaker. Same thing with her, that she will have to be part of a list of three that get sent up to the governor. So we're trying to work with the governor's office and the respective offices to try to coordinate that. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Executive Director DeVries Administration.
Thank you, Chair. And based on the inspiration that Rich Matsuda offered this morning, we'll call this the surf report. Let me summarize by saying surf's up. You hear us monthly talk about the offices, and just so we have the common vocabulary, there is a temporary office we're in right now. Thank you to Imiloa Astronomy Center in Kai'u Kimura. That is a two-person workstation, and we currently have 6 authorized positions, of which 4 are filled, 1 temporarily with Lloyd. The interim office we've identified, which would enable us to take all 6, should we hire the next 2 in short order. And then in the current legislation, there are 7 temporary positions identified that will help us during this transition period that eventually becomes full-time positions in a separate request. Having said that, Bill Stormont has been taking the lead on identifying, and Poena, on identifying potential locations. As I said, we have the identified a very strong location that we all like, that can house 6 to 7 people. In the meantime, some of these federal cutbacks are beginning to take out federal agencies from their leases. And to that end, Bill's been working with a facility that would enable us to build that capacity very quickly, so that we all can identify with this. In addition to administrative offices, we also need a base yard here in Hilo. And while the Bank of Hawaii building is still a very strong candidate, it doesn't allow us to consolidate the base yard and the administrative offices. So all of these things are kind of like a juggling act right now, and it's really important. I'm going to ask Bill to expand on kind of the work that he's been doing.
Well, just thank you, John, and Chair and members of the Board of Law. The interim office space is sitting now with the DAG's leasing office. Speaking with them this morning, it's possible that it could be available to us with a lease sign as early as June 1st. There's a couple of hurdles we've got to get over. We did an ADA compliance review with the DLNR's ADA coordinator earlier this week. DAGS is waiting on their report. It'll then go to the Deputy Attorney General that oversees DAGS for leasing space. Then back to the landlord. The landlord is in agreement with the pricing and so forth. So it's moving through the machinations of government leasing. We have talked with a property owner here in Hilo where the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory facilities are currently housed in Hilo. And looking at the possibility of some or all of that space in the near term and in long term for us. And the landowner is willing to work with us. I have confirmation from the USGS that they need to be out of that building by the end of September. It boggles the mind that the government is doing that. Hawaiian Volcano Observatory is an entity within the federal government that provides a tremendous service to this island. And that they are being forced out by their leadership is boggling, but I'll leave that alone. So anyway, there's lots in motion here, and I won't go any further in that until we know more, but that's among the things we're looking at for long-term office space and base rent space for us.
You know, and I would add that part of the juggling act that Bill's having to deal with is when you go to DAGS, they're looking at the authorized number of employees and then calculating square footage from that, right? And which is fine when you are a turnkey operation. When you're trying to build an organization, about the time we get to the first level, 6 people, we're now looking for something for 13, right? Additional. So I'm grateful to Bill and Poana for staying with it, and we will get this resolved. In all fairness to Imiloa, they could use that space that they're currently accommodating us in. So I'm sure that they are happy to see us there and would be happy to see us leave. So we'll continue to work on that. Any questions about that? I know it sounds really mundane, but it's like critical to our ability to build capacity, you know, at the pace that we need to. So I'm going to shift gears to the management plan RFP and ask Lloyd to give us an update. Lloyd?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. As you folks all know, we had to cancel our first RFP with just one offer that was not, we weren't fully confident that the person's offer was sufficient for us to have the work done. So we are now approximately, I'd say, 97% of ready to go with our second RFP. We are now in the process of getting an approval from using the staff of RCUH to assist us in getting out this RFP out there. We've changed the timing from posting till contracting from 4 months to 3 months. And we're just waiting for a governor's approval and a little tweaking. And hopefully we should be getting this RFP out if possible next week Friday. What we've done with this second RFP is we stayed with the management plan, and we did omit the part that says the part of the plan would be also the results of the operational, or what's the office support going to look like. So we took that part out, and we made it that we could amend this offer, or actually we could go out with a separate RFP on that part. So we would speed up the process of having the more important parts, which is the management plan out there. So that's where we are right now. Any questions or comments?
Let me also add and thank the board members who serve on the project and milestones pig, as well as the planning RFP pig, and Neil Hannes and Noi and Ben Kudo and Rich have been asked to weigh in on this. Extra kudos to Ben Kudo. Because Ben is in that field and works with the major planning firms. He has personally reached out to prep them and made himself available to connect them to this RFP so they can compete. One critical subcontractor that the planning firms who compete will need are those firms that focus on Hawaiian cultural planning and a Hawaiian cultural mindset that they can bring to this. If any of you have firms that you would like for us to put on a mailing list so that we make sure we get this information to them, get this information to the main contractor, the planning firm, who then subcontracts, we would welcome that in the next 72 hours if you could do it. Noi and Neil have furnished us some really credible names who do work at this scale and have a track record and a reputation for being able to deliver in this area, which is extremely important to our work. So I would just add that and open the floor for any questions on this planning RFP. Okay. Hearing none, okay, we had originally thought about a March community talk story session with the planning of the board retreat in March. We decided to move that talk story to April and double it up in the second quarter. So we'll have one in April, one in June. The one in April will take place in Waimea. I would ask you to pencil in April 17th and the 24th. Those are two options we're considering right now. I've turned to our two board members who reside in Waimea, Pumai and Rich, to help guide us to the appropriate place to convene. The time of day, we'll work out all of those logistics. We are decoupling the community talk story from the day of the board meeting. So that's why you don't see that. In the first 3 times around, we did that. And for those of you that came all the way from Honolulu, that made for a really long day. So just pencil in the 17th or the 24th. We'll make that announcement early next week and commit to one of those dates.
John, can I just remind you that the 24th is Merry Monarch Week? Okay.
I'm happy to announce
Nobody
that
will
the
be in my
17th. I'm happy to announce right now, it's not going to be the 24th. So, thank you for that.
Yeah, the practicality of getting flights, as well as the cost of those flights become really problematic.
Right in the middle of Awana, we should just take the stage. And there goes MKSOA, right? So anyway, we'll get back to you and confirm that date, but thank you for that, that's right. All right, and we'll get you more information about that. Those of you that can make it, please do. We're fortunate to have, as I said, 2 board members that live in the immediate community, and Lanakila is just down the street, in a sense. So we'll get that worked out as well. In the absence of Chair Kudo, who chairs the long-term transition working group, I'm going to ask his deputy, Paul Horner, to provide a update on the group's work. Paul?
Hello, you guys. Um, thanks. Thanks to Ben and all his hard work. But he's been working with Joel Cam and Natsumi Nishimoto on the matrix of all the observatory operating agreements, and it still continues. We're still working through that, and once the matrix is completed, I think it's going to be completed within the next couple of meetings, because we're meeting next week as well on I think the 20th or so. Anyway, so those once that matrix is done and we have it worked out, um, uh, then we can move forward, with CMS, with and the fiscal things and the agreements with managing uh, that massive operations up there. So there's really not much more to say, but once we get, it's the leases and the operating agreements that are the octopus that has to be managed. So that's about it for now. And then we'll catch up next week on Friday.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. The next meeting is a week from tomorrow.
Yeah.
And look forward to getting that closer, that tremendous amount of detail, that they're having to comb through. So thank you. Any questions from anyone about, the work of the working group?
Question? Sorry, so just a clarification, so the leases of the telescopes, just to clarify, I think I heard you say it's with UH and not with the individual telescopes?
No, the conservation use permits are with the UH. And not with individual telescopes. The leases are between UH and the individual observatories. So two separate issues, yeah.
Oh, okay. So what is the permits again? What is that about? Why we need that?
So the permits are, because we're in a conservation use area, the Board of Land and Natural Resources has to issue what they call CUPs, right? Conservation District Use Permits.
Okay.
To allow non-conforming activities to proceed on conservation land. So throughout the years since the 1970s, the UH has applied for those permits on behalf of the different observatories, right? Those permits have conditions and requirements that have to be taken care of, basically. So the question as we move forward on July 1st, 2028, is if we get those permits with those conditions and requirements, and we're also the regulator, how does that all work, right? So that's a conservation use permit. The lease issue is separate, right? The leases run until 2033.
Right.
So the question is, on July 1st, 2028, do we have in position the ability to assume the current leases between UH and the individual observatories? Yeah.
Okay, so these permits, is it granted annually or every 5 years or?
I don't know if there's an end date, but I look at it as kind of almost forever, not forever, but it's long term.
Okay, so once you get the permit, there's no review and there's no update. Once you get them already.
Yes, except that there are certain conditions, and I haven't gone back specifically. The one that has the most current conditions would be the TMT permit.
Oh, okay.
So there's certain things that have to occur, and part of that was what UH had to do to keep the permit current, you know?
Right.
And the TMT, whatnot, they were paying the rent and the community benefits package, etc.
Okay, so so who gets to determine what are the conditions of the permit? Who gets to determine that?
That has already been determined by the Board of Land and Natural Resources.
Oh,
Right.
and our authority can add to them or take away.
Oh, that's one of the questions that we're trying to get clarification from the legislature, is that on July 1st, 2028, who has ability to, as a regulator, to issue, modify, whatever those permits. We're taking a position that we do. But there are others that believe that the Board of Land and Natural Resources should continue with the authority.
Oh, okay. Oh, so sorry, my brain works slow. My bad.
That was good.
I appreciate those questions.
Those are good questions, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let me just add one more thing before we go to finance. And it's in part related to the planning RFP. As you all know, the University of Hawaii operates from an approved Board of Regents approved plan called the Comprehensive Management Plan. When we entered a joint management relationship with Center for Mauna Kea Stewardship, we fundamentally get defaulted into operating under that plan until at such time our authority has our own plan. To that end, in the month of May, month of April and possibly May, the senior staff is going to be conducting a series of 2-on-2 meetings virtually with each board member. We'll cap it at 1 hour to actually highlight the elements of the comprehensive management plan so that you have an idea of generally high level what is covered by the plan, areas that may concern you, may concern us at staff, frankly may even concern people at the University of Hawaii. And so we'll be working on a presentation that we can bring to each of you in a series of 2-by-2 meetings, so that, because you need to be aware of the fact that we are currently being guided, our actions are being guided by that plan. And in total, if 65% of that plan is valid, then there's every reason for us to embrace it. If there are areas within the plan that are concerning, then we should identify that and discuss it. But look forward to hearing from staff in the month of April and again in May. I think it's going to take at least 2 sessions for us to get through that. So I'll leave it at that. And
Can I ask you a question about that?
sure.
You mentioned the comprehensive management plan. There's also the UH master plan.
Right.
And I believe Act 255 in our requirements to develop our management plan kind of combine the aspects of both.
Yes.
So will we brief on the master plan as well?
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So the gist of it is your homework as authority members is to review. I'm sure you guys all reviewed it before, but review that so that when you have this discussion, you'll be sort of up to speed. It's a, as you know, fairly lengthy document.
5 inches thick. So
And so I have a question. So, and the reason we have to do this briefing and training, if I can call it that, in this way, is because we would otherwise be violating sunshine law to be able to go through it as a group. Is that correct? Is that a question? That's a question, I guess, that I ask to our Attorney General.
we could do either, we could do both, actually. I'm hoping that in the smaller sessions, we can get into greater detail and start accumulating questions, but ultimately it would come back to the full board as well. But if the board chooses to wanna do it in mass, publicly, I mean, we can do that too.
Just has to be appropriately noticed and, right, hopefully.
Yes, yes. So the 2x2 meetings would allow you to do it outside of the public meeting setting. If you did it as a board, you would have to go through notice and convene as a whole.
I would love to do one meeting, but doing 6 or 7 is okay too. I mean, and frankly, it's, yeah, I think we, the staff, feel responsible for.
So eventually, we're gonna have a full board meeting. to
That's right.
discuss, Because
That's right.
you're gonna have to merge all the different viewpoints, right? And then at some point, you gotta report to the whole board publicly.
Yeah.
Right?
Thank you.
Okay.
Again? What is that again?
We're gonna, eventually, if they meet individually on these 2x2s.
Okay.
You know, people may have, I'm sure everybody not gonna see things the same way. So at some point, we'll have to kind of put everything together. And once you put it together, we're gonna have to, at that point, have a public meeting and have a public discussion about the different viewpoints and what the merged view looks like, right? And, you know, somebody has a problem about this, somebody doesn't have a problem about this, what that all looks like, yeah. So we will have a community, accessible meeting to have a full discussion about what we believe we should be focusing on and what there is agreement on so far.
Okay, and that gonna be when again? When we're gonna start having
We're gonna start reaching out to people in April and May.
Okay. Thank you.
And not on Merry Monarch Week.
Yes, thank you.
So we got 3 weeks to work with. So, okay, I'm gonna call on Lloyd to provide an update on our financials. Lloyd?
Again, thank you very much. I'd like to start again. I'm sure all of you have a copy of what I sent out, but you know, we did start off with a $14 million legislative appropriation, and approximately 10.4 million was restricted. So our budget for this year is approximately like 3.6. Of that amount, 720,000 was allocated for employee payroll, and 2.888 was for all other expenses. As of the 8 months that ended in February, we basically spent 387,000 in payroll, which leaves us a balance of $333,000 left, which should be enough for the next 4 months. All other expenses is office and travel. We spent a total there of $24,000 for office, 13,000 for travel. So in total, payroll and other costs right now, we spent $424,000. We also have an encumbrance with the attorneys of $392,000. So we do have approximately $2.4 million left to spend for other expenses, which I have sort of put a schedule on that. The $1.5 million for management consulting contract. Hopefully we can encumber that in the month of June. And we have another $900,000 to spend for other expenses that may arise. Any questions? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd. At this time, we'll move to agenda item 8 and call on Greg Chun and his team to provide both an operational update and an update of the work of the Joint Management Committee. Greg?
Hello, board members. Nice to see you folks, albeit virtually. Sorry I'm not there today, but as you can see, I have members of our management team here with me today who will be participating in some of the material that we'll be reviewing with you folks in the Joint Management Committee portion of this agenda. I'd like to introduce them quickly. Rodrigo Romo, our General Manager of the Mauna Kea Shared Services Group. Mary Beth Young, our Manager of our Administrative Group. Nahua Gios, who I know many of you already know, Director of Stewardship Programs. And then Joy Yoshina, who is our Planning and Compliance Specialist. First item on the operational update, there's really not much I have to report. It's actually been relatively quiet and calm from an operational perspective. The weather this season thus far has been cooperative, so there haven't been as much road maintenance and snow clearing and all of that stuff that we've had to do in last year. So that's been nice. The crowds have subsided mostly since the holidays, though we do expect spring break to see a bump again. As Chair Komeiji noted, we did host President Hensel on the Mauna for an orientation and briefing. This was part of her visit to the Big Island to visit UH Hilo and Hawaiʻi Community College. She was here that whole week, and we were able to get a portion of her time before her formal tour of the rest of the UH programs and facilities and the board meeting that occurred, the Regents meeting that occurred that month. So that was nice. It provided her an opportunity to actually see what the Center for Mauna Kea Stewardship does on the ground. And we were able to take her up to the summit where she visited one of the telescopes, Canada France, who hosted us there. So that was a helpful orientation, but as John and John have noted from their meeting with President Hensel, she's got a lot on her plate, so she really is trying to absorb everything, drinking from a fire hose right now. So we look forward to further conversations with her as the transition process moves forward. The other thing from an operations perspective is just to let you folks know the environmental assessment for the underground fuel storage tank replacement project is underway. The consultants are still doing their background research. We expect that to be done later this month. We have a library and archive of material collected from past work that has been made available to them. But the consultants that we selected have also done prior work on the mountain, most recently with the parking ingress and egress project at the Visitor Information Station, where we expanded the parking several years ago. So they are familiar with the environment and the whole what UH does and the area specific for this project. So we are looking forward to seeing what they've collated in terms of the background research. That's all I have from an operations perspective for this month. Are there any questions?
Greg, I had a question on your math on your financial report at the end of the slide deck. Are you going to get to that later?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, if there are no questions on the operations update, John, do you want to move into the JMC portion of the agenda?
Yes, please.
Okay. The first item that we have discussed with the Joint Management Committee that we wanted to bring forward to you folks is the Halepohaku Warehouse Power Restoration Project. I'll let Rodrigo explain the project, but this project has been classified as a Type A project within our classification scheme, meaning that there's no action required from MKSOA on this project. We are providing this briefing for informational purposes. If there are comments or questions that you would like us to integrate into the proposal or into the project as it moves forward, we're certainly open to that. But once again, this is classified as a Type A project. So with that, I'm going to ask Rodrigo to go through the high-level explanation of what this project is all about.
Thank you, Greg. And just for reference, this presentation has been given already to our other internal review committees, the Environmental Committee, Kahuku Mauna, and Mauna Kea Management Board. There's been no objections or any comments from them opposing this project. We can scroll down the document, please, to where the slides begin. Farther down, right there. Yeah, perfect. So when the parking lot expansion and egress project of the VIS was done a couple of years ago, there used to be two long buildings that you can see on the left-hand picture that had power supplied to them from a transformer across the road via underground conduits. When the clearing was done to build a parking lot and the egress road, the power was removed. One of the buildings, the northernmost building, was removed, and power was never restored to the southernmost building. So it's been without power ever since. That building is currently used as a warehouse to store the inventory for the visitor information station and some other storage. The plan is to restore power to the facility so we can have add security cameras to it. We can add internet and power to it, just to facilitate and improve the inventory management at the warehouse. One of our plans that we have is to increase our online sales and to use that back room in the longhouse as added inventory storage for the online sales. If you keep scrolling down, please. Right there. So currently that yellow circle number 3, it's a power switchboard that has power from Helco, and there are existing buried conduit lines that follow that dotted line number 5 under the parking lot. There are available conduits that are not being utilized and have pull strings in them, which we can utilize to run power from that switchboard across the parking lot into a pull box that's under circle number 4. And then we would have to do about 75 feet of trenching following that red line number 6 from that pull box to one of the breaker panels in the long building. It's 75 feet of trenching in previously disturbed ground. So we're not going to be disturbing any new ground. It's a shallow trenching. It's about 10 inches deep by about 6 inches wide. And that can be done by hand. Keep going down. On the environmental side, so that's a different look of the pull box and the switch gear where the cabling would be running from to and from. Next slide, please. I guess it's not. Yeah. So as far as environmental issues go, there are a couple of self-planted mamana trees that are blocking access to the switchgear. So for safety reasons, they'll have to be removed. Luckily, they are small enough where they can be dug out and transplanted to another location, so they won't be lost. That other one that is taller, that you can see next to the VIS tab member, it's not directly in front of that breaker box, but it has potential to grow and obstruct access to it. So the only thing we will be doing on that one is pruning it back to keep access to that breaker box clear. And that is in a nutshell what the project is all about. We're basically trying to restore power. It's worth mentioning, that's the other self-planted mamana tree that's blocking access to the main breaker panel. As I was saying, it's worth noting that the building had power in the past, which means it has all the infrastructure already in it. It has all the cabling. It has 2 breaker boxes, all built to code. So it's just a matter of just connecting power back to the building. And that's, again, that's in a nutshell. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
That'll bring everybody back up and see if we get the question. Bueno, yeah. Anybody have any questions on this portion of the report? No. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Greg.
Okay.
Thanks for roll.
So move on to the next item, which is the financial modeling overview. There's 5 slides. Yeah, that's the first one. So just a little background on this. We have in the past, when MKSOA was first formed and we started first meeting with Chair Komeiji and Noi and others as folks were being confirmed. We presented or prepared and presented a pretty detailed briefing that covered how our finances work. Essentially, how the money comes in and how it is allocated for different and used for different purposes. That briefing is available. We are available to do that for any board member who would like to have a briefing. We've done it in accordance with Sunshine when we were able to do it when we've done it in the past with the board members. And I know we have some new board members and some who have never seen that briefing. What we were asked to do by the transition, the long-term asset transition working group, was to provide a summarized version of that more complete briefing to the working group, which we did last month. And the purpose there was so that Joel and the working group could understand and see how, again, the monies that flow into CMS are allocated and accounted for to cover and implement the various things that we are responsible for. And so what the working group wanted to understand or see was how these assets are paid for and how these assets are implemented and how these liabilities are paid for, if you will. So we prepared this summarized version of that more complete briefing. And then at your last meeting, it was requested that we provide this same briefing to you folks. So this first slide, just at a very high level, shows how we are functionally organized here at the Center for Mauna Kea Stewardship. As you folks know, we have some community advisory groups that we work closely with on any of a number of matters. And then we have a close relationship with both the Institute for Astronomy and Imi Loa, who we work with on different things as well. Within the stewardship side of the house is what I call it. We have those first 4 boxes of functions that are color-coded with the olive-colored boxes. Planning and permitting, resource management, education and outreach, and rangers, our ranger program. And then in the blue-colored boxes are the Mauna Kea Shared Services Group, which basically operates and manages all of the operations on the mountain as well as our administrative functions. Roughly speaking, the boxes in the olive-colored boxes, those are the budget for that group of functions is about $3 million a year, roughly. And those functions are funded through a combination of state general funds, tuition funds, tuition or TFSF, tuition fees and special fees. And then something called RTRF. These are funds that CMS receives from the university system that helps to support research functions that are not necessarily tied to a specific grant, for example. And then we have our special fund. We have our own special fund, which right now is comprised of TMT rent, TIO rent, commercial tour operator fees, and some miscellaneous other fees. So those olive colored boxes, once again, are basically funded through this combination of funding sources. The blue boxes are funded through a combination of what we call user and service fees. And these are the fees that the Mauna Kea observatories pay for the operations on the mountain, as well as CMS pays our share and IFA pays their share as well. In addition to that, there are some monies that come in from the visitor information station sales that help to support that particular operation. So in total, that budget is about $5.5 million a year. Because the money comes in to UH from various sources, we have to account for them in different ways. And in addition to that, part of our accounting is under UH, and part of our accounting is under RCUH. So they have different systems themselves. So what we're going to get into can get a little complicated, but suffice it to say that a lot of how we are structured financially is somewhat unique to UH and how we have set up our operations and relationship with the observatories. In some ways, the observatories operate like a tenant association that you would have in a shopping center, for example, or a homeowners association. So part of the budget for MKSS has to be approved by the observatories, because that's how that part of our operation has always been set up. It is a collaboration, a partnership, if you will, that UH manages, but the observatories pay the bulk of those expenses in those blue boxes. And we'll get into some of the details in the next couple of slides. So I'm going to turn it over to Nahua now for the next slide, which is kind of her mind map that she created when she first started to make sense of how all of this works.
Aloha, everyone. So when I first started, kind of like you folks, I was totally confused because there were so many different aspects to what we do. And so I created this flow chart, I guess you kind of mind map, to help myself understand all of the different moving parts that we were managing. So at the very top is that governs everything that we do is the University of Hawaii's general lease with DLNR. And from that, we have three things that support or fall under that to help us manage that general lease. We have our master plan, our administrative rules, and then under that is our comprehensive management plan. Our master plan is basically sets the vision of where the university what it wants to do for the Mauna, and the administrative rules provides us with guidelines to manage public access and commercial activities. The comprehensive management plan then grew from that and basically provides us a roadmap, I guess you would call it, of how we're going to manage the Mauna with the vision that the university has given us through the master plan. From that is what the observatory subleases then flows from that. Basically, all of the parts within the subleases have to comply with the master plan and the comprehensive management plan, as you see it in blue. And the OSDAs, which we call the Operation Scientific and Development Agreements, it flows from that. So our observatory subleases are pretty, I call them vanilla. They're all very similar. They're very short, they're not very long. And then the OSAs is where we get into the details about how the university will interact with each of the different observatories. And from the OSAs, in that you will find three major parts. It'll include the viewing time to UH, and that allotting time goes back to the university to the Institute for Astronomy. There's scientific cooperation. It talks about what the university will do and what the MKOs will do. And then there are shared services like how they will support Mauna Kea shared services through a no profit, no loss. And so basically it's just cost plus administrative fees. And then all of that, as you can see in the middle, is the conservation district use permits, which allow the observatories to operate on their subleases. And that is held by the university on behalf of the observatories. Part of the reason the university did that was so that we could control management, to make sure it gives us a little bit of leverage to make sure that the observatories are taking care of the land and doing what they need to do. If they held it, it would be a little bit harder for us to hold them. And this way, we can ensure that they are complying with all of the conservation district rules. They're complying with our comprehensive management plan and taking care of the Mauna how we think the Mauna should be taken care of. In the orange is how it flows back. As you see from shared services, the observatory funding goes back to the Mauna Kea shared services. In the black, you can see that the UH funds, and kind of ties in a little bit of the money part that Greg was talking about. It shows how we get funding, like he said, CMS, stewardship services, and then down to Mauna Kea shared services. And again, Mauna Kea shared services gets money through direct funding, which is a prior based on all of our overhead and operating expenses, and then pay per use funding, which is basically if you stay a night at Halepohaku, you pay a certain rate. And I think that's it for my board.
Okay, so that's a more detailed explanation or overview of how things are structured. Now we'll get into some of the numbers. So the next slide, I think, is Rodrigo, or is it Mary Beth? Mary Beth, okay.
So aloha, everybody. First off, as you know, I'm admin, so I'm generally used to being behind the scenes, so I apologize if I get a little nervous in talking, but I'm honored to present this to you all today. So this is the stewardship side of the budget. So just a kind of a broad overview. So for revenues, as Greg said, we have UH funds and non-UH funds. So the RTRF and the tuition fees are our UH funds. Last year, I did not budget any RTRF funds for various reasons, but historically, we've gotten about $500,000. So in total from UH, we generally get about 1.6, 1.7 million, and this will have to be replaced by MKSOA going forward. The next funds are the non-UH funds. These are the tour operator revenues and the TMT rent. The CTOs pay monthly and they pay on a per person use. And we generally get about $20,000 a month. The TMT rent, that's an agreed upon amount and they pay biannually. So then going to the expenses, just a couple notes. It's mostly self-explanatory. Do you mind just scrolling down a little?
Oh, yeah. Right there, thanks.
So just a couple notes. Again, it's mostly self-explanatory, but our biggest expenses, as you can see, are our ranger program and our compensation and benefits. Our ranger program is about $130,000 to $150,000 a month. And then the payment to OHA, that is 20% of what we collect from TMT and our CTOs. Finally, I didn't put anything in the research cultural planting management bucket, and that's because I coded everything the way UH codes this, but generally there are obviously our salaries for like Justin's group and Kaleo's group can go in there, and then our consultants can go in there and a bunch of our supplies. So I just wanted to point that out, that we're not spending anything in that bucket of money. I just coded it differently. And then I just want to point out one typo that I missed, and Neil, this might be what you picked up on. In the last slide, I didn't update the TMT number, so we're off about $20,000. So I'm not sure if that's what you picked up on, but I just wanted to point that out. And I will turn it over to Rodrigo for the MKSS side.
Since you raised that, no, it's just, it was the revenues in excess line that didn't add up to me.
Yes, yeah, and that's where that is. That's that $20,000 that so when I updated the standalone CMS budget, I did update it with the actuals for TMT rent, and I accidentally forgot to update the combined. But I can update that and send it to Greg.
Okay, thank you. I guess what I have before, go back, Nahua. So we know how much is being spent, or you can track that. It takes a while for me to track it, but what is it in relationship to the need, or how does it relate to the operational goals that you have?
Well,
do you understand that question?
Yeah, let me take a shot at it. On the stewardship side, what you see there, those revenues and expenses are all in service of implementing the management plan, the master plan, and the administrative rules. So, when you talk about the goals of those activities or functions are articulated in the management plan.
Okay, so those are the impacts we're having. And are you like fully funded? Are you achieving your milestones as planned? And there's an equilibrium between the money spent and the milestones that you set, or are you short funded? I mean, are we losing ground on our milestones because we don't have enough money? That's what I'm trying to understand.
I would say historically in the past, our predecessor Office of Mauna Kea Management probably was not funded to the level it should have been. What we have been able to do because of the TMT rent and the ongoing up to now support that we've been getting from those RTRF funds has been able to build out some of our programs, specifically the Ranger program, as well as our resource management program. Those are two areas that we've and our actually education and outreach. Yeah, we didn't have staffing in some of those, or we certainly didn't have enough staffing, but our education and outreach coordinator position was empty for a long time. So with the monies that the revenues that we have been able to get through the TMT rent and the RTRF, we were able to invest in those programs and start to build them out. I don't think that they're where we want them to be, but we're in a definite better position than we were 5 or 7 years ago.
Based on the revenue that we have and the funding we have, I think our trajectory is on the uphill, and we're reaching most of our milestones. There are things that we would like to do in addition, but I think if we continue to have the funding that we have, we'll continue to be able to reach our goals and milestones that we have for ourselves.
Okay, that's the key point I think I'm trying to get to.
Yeah. I think though if we do lose some funding, we are at risk of having to reduce and cut back, particularly on our Ranger program and some of our other things that we have expanded. So that's something to keep in mind.
Thank you.
Well, I'd also say for this budget that I put together, I did a pretty aggressive budget. So what you're seeing in revenues in excess of expense might be a little aggressive at this moment, but I'm really trying to find the full scope of the program, even if it's a little bit high at the moment. So I don't know if that makes sense, but.
And if I can jump in here to kind of flesh out Neil's question a little bit, one thing that is at risk, and as John Komeiji was saying, when he was meeting with our president, this EO stuff from the federal government, it's a 24/7 concern.
And if we have to carry over grant-funded staff in other areas, that is going to be tapping our RTRF funds in a very serious way. As well as the funding of some of our MKOs is connected to federal funding that is currently at risk. And I just want to put that out there. We haven't reached any, stop work orders in these areas, but it is something we are paying continual attention to right now.
May I ask a question also? Has there been an analysis from the University of Hawaii IFA side of it as to what should be their cost of such a program up in Mauna Kea?
I'm not certain about that, Lloyd. We'd have to ask Doug.
Okay, thank you very much.
Question. Check, real quick, so what does RTRF stand for again?
Research Training Revolving Fund.
Oh, okay. And then on the revenue side, so the 20,000 a month for tuition, is that like this, like how that play out? Is that like students, they apply, this is like the astronomy students or?
No. UH Hilo helps fund our operation in part from tuition monies they collect from students.
TFSF is a fund that is where all the tuition and fees are accepted. And then it gets parceled out to the various functions of the university, of which this is one.
Okay. Oh, I see.
The $20,000 a month is for the commercial tour operators.
Oh, that goes to you guys.
Yes.
Okay, another question. You know how so you guys have you guys oversee how much UH telescopes are on the Mauna right now? 2 or 3?
UH operates directly the UH-88.
Yeah.
Then they own but do not fund operations for UCURT and JCMT. And then they have a relationship that they contract essentially to manage IRTF. UH does not own IRTF, but they manage it.
Okay, because you know how, sorry, just trying to think how, you know how like revenues get generated by observation time, like Keck. I don't know how much you know how like I don't know if it's true, but one day I'd like to see like something like 20,000 a night or something, some crazy number of revenue, or like that's how much it costs or something. It would be nice to have that breakdown, you know. And then so do you guys receive revenues for like, I don't know, somebody observation time?
No.
Does Keck and other observatories receive revenues?
Rich would be in a better position to, I think, answer that.
The way it works, Mayor, is that the institutions, so like to make it simple, for Keck, it's Caltech and UC, basically provide our base operations funding so that researchers, meaning faculty and grad students and so forth, from their institutions get to use the telescope. So it's not really on a per night basis. So there's not like an exchange of dollars for nights of observing.
Is there an invoice that gets sent somewhere? Like,
no, not for nights of use. So they fund our base operations and we provide the services so that the astronomers from those institutions get to use the telescope. We also have a cooperative agreement with NASA, and so the national community has some access as well. But it's all in terms of funding, operation of the facility writ large, not a per night, like a fee or anything like that. It doesn't work that way. It's sort of like if you were operating a medical research lab and they say like the university pays for the operations of that lab, and the researchers from that institution get to utilize the lab. It's kind of more like that model, academic model, than a commercial model.
So yeah, because I went back and I watched Kai Kahile's video, a while back, and he was kind of trying to break down the amount of revenues that could be, that somehow it gets, I don't know how the thing play out, but like it was kind of like a ridiculous number per night. So is that just a misunderstanding?
It's very expensive to run the observatory and to pay for new technology. So it does require lots of funds to operate the telescope, but it doesn't work on a per night exchange of money basis.
Yeah. Well, at some point, just to be transparent, everybody know where to follow the money, right? Like where the money going. So like how that all play out. Like just say Keck, for example, since we get you on the authority. So, but could be UH, but now what I'm hearing is UH they don't make any money from observation. So, but maybe Keck makes. But now I'm hearing maybe Keck doesn't make. So like would be nice to get a better understanding of how all that, like where does the money go, and get extras. How much of the extras, and
Yeah. So maybe we can provide a briefing or something like that. But we're
because that's the other elephant in the room, right? I mean,
yeah, I understand. We always get these kind of questions, so it would be good to clear it up. But we're essentially a 501c3. We're a nonprofit, so we're not out to make money of any kind. We're trying to make discoveries, basically. So
it's just amazing how much costs for one night of discovery. So like, why is it? Oh, because so it costs that much because that's how much it. So at the end of the day, it costs that much, but at the end, somehow it all breaks out even because that's how much expenses also go out.
Exactly. Yep. And a lot of it has to do with the initial investment of building the telescopes, which are very expensive. Yeah.
So just everything all break even then. I gotcha.
Yep. Thanks for the question, though.
Yeah.
Can I follow up on Mary's question? Because maybe there are a couple of things that Mary's alluding to. One is an agreement that IFA has through the contracts, through the university agreements, some viewing time that's allocated from the various telescopes, right? So there's that. The other thing is, it may not be Keck's current model, and I don't know about the other telescopes, but there have been discussions, not necessarily with the ones on Mauna Kea, but with other facilities, US-owned facilities, about selling viewing time, or allowing viewing time to be purchased by various researchers. So that may not be the situation here, but certainly the discussion about the value of viewing time in the discussion about the value of facilities on Mauna Kea has always been, sort of a part of this.
Right.
Understanding or misunderstanding for the community, either, both.
Yeah, like for example, because I was reading Yale, Richard, Yale and NASA, they pay for Keck nights, right?
Yep, access to observing. Yep.
And how could you share how much, or no? It's just private.
No, it's not private, but I don't have the numbers in front of me. I don't want to be on a public thing and misquote anything. But if I have some prep time, I can share.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Can I follow up? And I think Rich, your offer of a briefing, I think would be good, so we better understand this. But going back to, you have an academic model, and yet I noticed on the last spreadsheet, you have COGS, you have cost of goods sold, and it's not picked up in the total, it's just in the shared service. What's sold? I was trying to tie that to something above.
Let's go on to the next slide so that Rodrigo can get through the MKSS budget, and that's where the COGS will show up.
Okay, thank you.
So Yeah, this spreadsheet here.
Okay,
Rodrigo?
just so that everybody's clear, there's two big buckets that we're talking about, right?
Right.
One is shared service and one is stewardship. We just went
Right.
through stewardship just now. COGS is gonna come out under shared service and the visitor center. So hey, just keep in your own mind that there's two big buckets, separate buckets that are different cost centers as well as different ways of gaining revenue.
That's correct. Thanks, John. So Rodrigo?
Yeah, thank you. So the previous slide, Mary Beth talked about, that is for CMS. This slide is for Mauna Kea Shared Services. Up on the top in revenues, I have color coded the source of the revenues we get. I mean, before we get into that, as Nahua explained in her slides, we get two types of funding from the observatories and CMS, and that's direct payments and payments per use. Payments per use include the use of Halapahaku room nights, meals, gasoline, utilities, facilities, and others are paid in a agreed format based on the size of the observatories. Those size factors had been agreed upon by the observatories themselves. So we see there's 4 different sources of revenues that we get. Yellow is from the observatories, and green is from CMS stewardship, and red is from IFA, and blue is visitor information sales. We also have individual cost centers within MKSS, and their label is food and lodging, visitor station, road and snow, facilities, other services, weather, and admin. So you can see some of those cost centers. For instance, the weather center is solely funded by the observatories because that provides the observatories with weather data that they use to schedule and plan their observation nights. Same with other services. Other services include a couple of instrumentation cameras that the observatories get information from, and their outreach program. So that cost center is strictly funded by observatories alone. Facilities gets revenues from all our users, except from obviously not the visitor station. And then when you go to expenses, that's where the cost of goods sold come in. And you can see the only 2 cost centers that have cost of goods sold are food and lodging, and that accounts for all the consumables that we use up there for all the meals that we prepare, cleaning supplies. And for the visitor station, that's the cost of all the goods that we sell, all the inventory that we purchased to sell at the VIS, that's the cost of goods sold that we get. Each cost center then has a beginning balance and an end balance. We try to keep those end balances as low as possible, just because we are not like Nahua mentioned, we're a zero profit, zero loss organization. And so that is where the funding, if you notice, the only cost center that has a growing or a high fund balance is facilities, and that is because that's where we are putting the money we're collecting from the observatories to fund the underground storage tank project. We are collecting in over the course of 3 years to be able to cover the cost for that project. And that is kind of in a nutshell our financial snapshot of MKSS. This is what we had forecasted for this fiscal year budget. Did that answer the question about cost of goods sold?
Yeah, I'm working at it. You've addressed it. Whether it's fully absorbed in my mind, yeah, I'm still trying to relate the numbers one to another. But thank you very much. I got the principle.
So this last slide is the consolidated financial statement, showing both the stewardship side and the shared services side. And I don't know if there's anything more we need to add to this. I think it's just a compilation of what you saw on the previous 2 slides.
So, Joanna, go back to Nahua's slide. Or Greg's slide. Okay, one more. Okay, so just to get everybody clear again. So stewardship is made up of the olive functions, right? So if you look at what's the functions covered under stewardship is planning and permitting, research management, education and outreach, and rangers. Okay, so that's one bucket. That bucket is paid by the tuition, the RTRF, TMT rent, and tour operators. Okay, so stewardship is those olive colored functions. What Rodrigo just talked about, MKS shared services are the blue functions, right? Admin, utilities, food and lodging, visitor information statement. They have different revenue sources. The revenue sources for those are primarily the observatories, as well as revenue and the observatories pay on two bases. One as a general fee that's split up among the observatories, as well as per usage. So if you, I think he said, if you order a meal, you get charged so much. If you stay one night at Olive Oahu, so that's a revenue source for them. Along with what was the other revenue source? Visitor information, sales, right? That's the other big revenue source, right? The observatories.
Yeah, John, but let me, it's a bit misleading because it seems like a big revenue source, but right now the BIS is still running with a $200,000 per year subsidy from the observatory. So still our sales are lower than our expenses at the BIS. So it might seem like a big number, but it's not like a money-making operation.
All right, so it's primarily the observatories, right? Okay, and just remember that the observatories have agreed among themselves about how they apportion the large bucket. So each observatory pays a certain amount. The reality is that the larger observatories are subsidizing and pay a larger share than the smaller observatories, probably not proportional, right? But anyway, that's the agreement that the observatories have made among themselves. The other part of it is what we talk about per use and utilization. Okay, so just use that framework, right? The olive colored functions is one, blue functions is another, and their revenue sources are very different.
So I just have one question, Rodrigo, on the MKSS budget. There was a line for overhead. What is that?
A line for what was that again?
Overhead.
Overhead.
Do you want to explain that?
So overhead mostly goes to support our admin staff. Because admin staff doesn't collect anything from the observatories directly. Is that your question?
So what's the overhead fee?
Overhead is 10%. So we
10%.
charge a 10% admin overhead, and then RCUH charges a 2.9% overhead. So combined, we have a 12.9% admin overhead for all the services we provide.
Yes.
And so that is sufficient to pay your admin payroll?
Yes.
Other question?
Chair, I was really appreciating your trying to explain things, and Greg, just to as a suggestion, I think we have a lot of information here about what is, and what it lacks is the story as to what it means, and some critical kind of summary points that really explain what's happening here in your budget. And I think that's exactly what Chair was trying to do for us, and it's very helpful.
Great.
Okay. So first, as part of this discussion, I just mentioned to John, maybe next meeting we can have Rich, the MKO, sort of describe and address in more detail some of the questions that the mayor raised about the observatory's operations and how that piece fits into this overall piece here. we'll try to define it a little bit more.
Yeah, and once again, Chair, just to interrupt real quick, open invitation to anybody who wants to get a more complete briefing on at least our side of the operation and how things work.
I was on mute. I said, okay. Yeah, it's similar to the kind of briefing I had to give the Mauna Kea working group when we were together. So yeah.
I have one question to either Nahua or Greg. What is the frequency again of payment for the TMT rent?
Twice a year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? All right, thanks, Greg and team. We appreciate it. I'm sure you get calls for other people to get a little bit more detailed understanding. So thank you very much for what you put together as well as the explanation. That's all this way. So any necessity to confer with our attorney on any issues in an executive session? If not, the next authority meeting is April 10th. We're trying to finalize the community meeting. It looks like it'd be April 17th, but we'll get that final. The other thing is, like I told you on the retreat that we're gonna have to, we'll get back to you by tomorrow about how that might work. All right, any other announcements? If not, can I get a? I know there's a big argument in the general community whether you need a motion to adjourn.
Well, you wanna just try joining without a motion and
What?
see what happens?
There's a big dispute going on the limb there. Okay, I'm gonna go out and use like executive.
Well,
Oh, yeah. Meeting is now adjourned. All right, thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha.